Hi, my name is Shivani Rana. I'm an author and a content creator.
You were talking about like the ordinary everyday life, right?
Yeah.
And like how we're not necessarily featured, whether it be in writing or in fashion. So can you kind of speak about like what that ordinary day-to-day life means to you? Like,
Right.
Why you focus on that?
So I was born and raised in America. In the representation that we do have, like that's never there. Like it's always like the stereotypical heavy accent, taxi drivers. Even like when you do have like the American Indian, it's always the white savior complex. Like there's never just like a South Asian and a South Asian, ever. Personally, like I don't see myself in that. Even like growing up, like you had like Ravi from Jesse, and then you have like Baljit, right? Like I'm like, okay, that's not what I am. I'm just like an ordinary girl living like an ordinary life. When I go out, I don't think I like portray like, oh, Indian, right? Like I'm just live it. Even like when we go to like the beach and like you walk the boardwalk, you see the keychains with names. You never see yours, but like there's so many of us here. So like why can't we have that as well? I just want to create that like representation in my work, in my writing, in fashion, even like dressing like a normal girl. Like I don't go out in jhumkas like 24/7, right? So that's like my whole motive.
So what's your take on like the whole Indo-Western thing? Like what is like your feeling towards that?
I like it, but I feel like it's not accurate to everyone. Like not everyone is going like that 24/7. And I feel like that's so like saturated into like media now, especially with social media. Everyone's doing that. And like when, I think it was during COVID that I saw that, and I was like, okay, like for a moment, I was like, okay, maybe I should do that too. But I was like, that's not authentic to me. Like there's so many girls like me that like just dress in like jeans and a top, like go out in like whatever style that they curate and not like embrace the Indianness. But like that doesn't mean I like forego the culture, because like I can go like full Indian and then I can go full American. So I do like the Indo-Western, but I feel like I'm more inclined to being like fully traditional or like fully American.
I'm hearing a lot of parallels between fashion and writing.
Right.
What is that parallel? I guess where did that come from?
Okay, I read a lot of South Asian romances. I feel like it's written so like for white people, to say the least, because it's like I read it and it's like they're spending like 2 pages describing palak paneer. Not everything needs to be a teaching experience. Like you can just be yourself. There's so many other cultures that do it that way, where it's like you see like any other POC, they're not going out like fully like decked out in their cultural clothing. Like so why do we have to do that to like make our like place?
Why do you think we do that?
I think it's just a struggle. Like ever since we were like young, I know like most South Asians have like went through like the bullying, like looking at turmeric, right? Like bringing our own food, bringing like any part of our culture into like a public setting. Like it was always so like hard. And I think that's why we like try to incorporate it now into everyday life. But like I don't think it's needed. Like I think we can make a space where like you can be one or the other.
So kind of going back to writing, what does writing mean to you?
Oh, it's like everything to me. Like I like to say it's therapy, just because when I do write, I feel so much better after. And if I'm not writing, like I can feel like I'm like in the ground. Like I need to be writing something at every time. In my notes app, like poems, and my computer's filled with writing projects. I think it's just a good like escape from reality, especially with like everything that's been going on during COVID. I really like picked up on it, and it's just like a safe spot for me. Like it's safe.
Have you thought about like how maybe people will perceive your writing in the future?
I have thought about that. My like biggest life goal is to make a change for like South Asians. I want to do that through writing because it's so hard to see that. Just recently there's like a space for South Asians, which is great. Going forward, I really want my books to be a pillar as well. These are just everyday stories for South Asians.
So how has your family's history impacted your work today?
Okay. So a lot of what I write is inspired by like my family. Most of the things I write are like inspiration because I used to journal. Obviously I would like rant about my family because what else are you gonna do, right? Like you're 13, you're just sort of going at it. When I did start writing, I would look at all my previous journal entries and be like, okay, like I wanna channel these emotions that I had when I was a kid and put it into the stories that I'm writing. A lot of the things that I went through, that's what I write about. I grew up in a very like traditional family where the women go into like bio and then the men go into like engineering and like comp sci or like IT. I have an older sister. She works in the medical field. We all have a cousin we get compared to. She's in medical school. I'm like the oddball out. So I used to always be into like all art forms. So it was like drawing, dancing, painting, writing. I was kind of like told to hold back from it because they were like, it's not gonna get you anywhere. Like art is nothing. It's just a hobby. Don't focus too much on it. I switched out of my bio degree in college. So I was doing bio up until I was like 18. At that point, I was like, I can't do it anymore. It's not for me. Like I simply cannot deal with the stress that it brings. I like to bring that part of my life into books and make it the opposite. The parents and the novels that I write, they are like more open to art. They want their kids to do art. It's like things that I wish would have happened for me.
That's really interesting. So what did you do? Like so you got to this point, you're 18, you're like, I can't do bio anymore. So what did you do after that?
So I like to say that you never really know how bad it is until like it's like so bad that you're like, how did I get here? I think it was when I first got into college. Before that, like I think there were like a little bit of like signs of like depression, anxiety, but like I never like thought of it like that. I was just like told that I was a rebel kid. And like my family kind of like doesn't really believe in mental health as much. So they were always just like, oh, you're just sad, right? Like, oh, like get over it. So I would like lash out, and like I didn't know what that was until I got into college. And like freshman year of college, like I went through like the worst changes. Like it was so bad for me. Like I said, I was doing bio degree. I had met some like bad people. I was almost failing out of college. It just felt like there was this big weight on me, and I was like, I need to like change something, but like I couldn't do it. So I was told by my parents that I had to stay in STEM. Like they were like, no, you're not switching to anything other than STEM. So I switched to a psychology degree because it was also around the time where my mental health got like really bad. So I was like, okay, if I do psychology, at least I can learn about myself. I told my parents I did psychology, and it was still like an issue for them because they're like, oh, you're not going to medicine? And I was like, no, like I'm not. But I was like, I gotta do what I gotta do. Like I can't struggle in that way. That's when I like developed this insane like social anxiety as well. And I never had like social anxiety before. Like I was like the outspoken kid of my family, of my friend groups. So in college, I was like talking to no one. It just felt like I couldn't get anywhere. I don't know if it's like this with like all brown parents, but like my parents are very like hands-on, and like I would want like my own like space, but like I would never get it. My mom would always be like, you know, like what are you doing with your life? Like you're not even doing anything. Like you sit at home, like you go to school, you come home, you sit at home, you go to sleep. Like do something. I had no like, yeah, like I had no energy to do anything. So I wasn't writing, I wasn't reading, I wasn't like none of my hobbies. And like I had stopped all of that so long ago. There needs to be something that like gets me out of it. And I think taking up like psychology really helped me because I got to understand that, you know, like there is something wrong with me. Because at first I was like, oh, everyone goes through it. Like I never like truly believed that I wasn't normal. So I take like psychology, I'm like, okay, I think I like genuinely like have issues. After COVID, I realized that like maybe I might also have like BPD. The way that my family works, like we don't believe in like therapy, we don't believe in like mental health. So I just like sit at home, like write, like that's my escape. Even to this day, I think like it's still an issue for my family. I'm not in like bio because everyone is like doing it, and like I'm like the oddball out, like chasing like an art field that like obviously it's so hard being like a South Asian in like this field, but like I'm like, you know, I'm gonna do it because it's the only thing that like got me out of that like state. I think it's a good release. I put a lot of the things that I go through in my writing. It's kind of like me telling my story without telling people it's my story. Like I have people that have read it and they're like, oh my God, like I can relate to this part of it, this part of it. And it kind of makes me feel like, okay, like I'm not alone. It's so bad to say, but I don't leave my characters untraumatized. They're all traumatized in some way. Everyone needs that space, especially as a brown person. You don't talk about the things you go through as much. You're not allowed to, I feel.
Have you found solace within other women, brown women, who have been able to help you with that?
I have like a good friend circle of brown people. We like break it down every day, like we'll talk. I'm very close to my sister, so I'll like tell her certain things, but like not specifics because I'm just like not used to that. There has been times where like I've very much indulged myself in my work where it's like I didn't know who I was without it. When I've hit like slumps, like writing slumps or whatever, I felt so lost, and like that's like the moment where I was like, okay, like if I'm not doing this, like why am I like not okay? That is like one thing that I strive for. You can't make your hobby your work. Oh, you know, like I'm gonna be okay if I'm not doing it. So you have to have like something else on the side. And I think for me that's drawing. So whenever like I'm not working, even though like writing is my hobby, it's like my passion, it's still a work because you're still indulging in it. You're still putting all that mental pressure to like get something done. So I think it's very important to have something that's not a requirement. When you're not doing your job, you have that to fall back on. You never feel empty. Throughout time, there has been so many like expectations put on women that like we need to like devalue those. Well, women are supposed to be like this way, that way. But I feel like why can't we be like men, right? Like you look at men, like they do whatever they want. Like why can't we do that? Just being able to appreciate a woman for like who she is and not wanting like not putting expectations on her, like societal, familial, anything. Like you just need to understand that like every woman is different.
What are those expectations?
That are like put on us? You have to be quiet when you're in a room. You have to sit ladylike. You're like the house runner, right? Cook, clean, do this. Why can't a man do that? It's literally just a life role. Like you need to be able to do these things in order to live. So why is that not put on a man to like run the house? That's like what's so important, to feel like we have a voice, and we don't half the time. Even though like when you like say the expectations of like being the pillar, they say that, but it's like you're still not allowed to do the things you want to do. So I think it's very important to give a woman her space. You do like what makes you happy instead of like, you know, calling you the pillar of the house, but like the man is like the one controlling everything. My mom does like have the bigger voice in my household and in my family. All the men are very like, give the women their like space. So I like when I grew up, like I had like friends that were like, oh my God, like my dad say like goes. And I'm like, okay, that's not how it was for me. Like for me, it's like if my mom says something, that's the way it's going. So I've like been raised in a place where it's like women were the people that were like on top. So it's like crazy how like you say like, you know, Mahabharata and like all that stuff. And I'm like, that's kind of like the format that like my household operates on, where it's like the women are the ones like doing everything and like the man will like sit back and be like, no, like what you want is what's gonna happen.
So how important is that? I mean, I feel like we all know the answer to this, but like how important is having that example? Like how has that shaped you?
It truly like made me like the woman that I am, because like I like take nothing from like a man. like simply put, like because that's what I see, right? So I like to tell people like the way that my dad like treats me, my mom, like all the women around him, is how like I want to be treated. So like if you cannot provide what like I have in my household, then like you have no reason to be in my life. Because if this is how I am, like when I get married and like move in with you, why should I have like a whole different lifestyle?
Yeah. Let's get to the meat of the interview now. So what does womanhood mean to you?
I think it's just being feminine and like okay with it. There's been so many changes where it's like we have our masculinity out there and like we have to be like hard and tough. But like why can't we just be like girls? Like why do we have to like conform to this like harder version of ourselves? Just free, open, like with opinions, have strong opinions. You do have a part in society. That's really important for every woman to like understand. You can put your voice out there, people will listen now.
And so how does that impact your book?
I like to make the women much stronger characters than men, and not in just the things that they do. I think just like in the way that they behave, in the way that they are portrayed. The South Asian woman that takes nothing. She stands her ground, will literally like put a man down. I think that's like the biggest like take on like womanhood, because for so long we've just been silenced.
So then what is the perfect daughter?
I don't think there is a such thing as perfect daughter. Looking at our moms, like they were daughters once, they've messed up, right? I don't think a perfect daughter is something that exists, because expecting a woman to be perfect is like kind of going against everything that like I stand for, at least, because it's like it's okay to make mistakes. And I think like just being a perfect woman is what's more important, and that's more about like just owning it, like owning the feminine side of you, owning that you can make a mistake and like people will forgive it.
What is like making us think that we can't necessarily be forgiven?
I think a lot of it is also like the take on being a South Asian woman, because especially in like America, we're trying to have our place. And if we mess up, like people are gonna be like, oh, like whatever, like, you know, there's like a billion other people doing it. And like those people will be like white people, because those are the people that people gravitate towards. So I think a lot of that stems from like that ideology where it's like we have to be perfect for people to like look at us. we have grown so far from like the way that we used to be. And especially being like immigrant families, I think there has been that like pressure where it's like, no, like there's a certain way you have to like behave. There's a certain way that, a certain path you have to follow. And I think that's the reason why it doesn't work, because we've been so like caught up in like these like newfound ideologies where it's like, no, like you have to like focus on money and not happiness before like anything else. Back then, no one really cared about like money. Like people were just trying to like be happy, be like okay. I think we've gone so far from that it just doesn't work out anymore.
Yeah, I was watching a movie recently, and it said that society is so focused on having rather than being. What does that mean to you?
The people with money are saddest, and then the people without them are happiest, because you value like the smaller things more. And I think that's the essence of being. Like you just see the little things in life. When you have a lot of money, like I've seen it happen, and it's like the richer you are, the more you don't care about like other things. Like you focus so much on like objects that like you forget that life is not just about like what you have. It's about like who you have in your circle, who you have in your life. What are your ideologies? What is like your mental looking like? Historically, I think South Asian women were just seen as like, you know, to be like in the household, but like it wasn't a constraint. Like you weren't like reserved, you weren't anything. Like the men allowed women to like go out. The men allowed women to like do what they wanted, even though like, you know, like you have like Ram and Sita. But like at the end of the day, Sita's like the one that comes out that's like, you know, like you look at Sita more than you look at Ram, because she's the one who did like all the like Agni test and like all that other stuff, right? So it's like, I think women had such a big power back then that like we've lost sight of it. Even though like they're gods and goddesses, like we shouldn't have lost sight of it, but like we did, because the way that society has like progressed, it hasn't allowed us to be like that genre of women. Somewhere far away, I know there's a version of me who's exactly what I aspire to be. She's sweet and gentle, yet loud against those who scream her name. She's resilient and courageous. She's everything that I'm not. Somewhere far away, perhaps in a dreamland, I know she exists. Although she seems to be 100,000 miles away, my life's quest is to find her and to consume everything she is, and then to become her.
Fantastic.